Hi everyone, welcome to BetterHelp's YouTube channel. Today we're going to have an awesome conversation about a topic that's really fascinating, and it's actually all about you, the ego. My name is David Yadush, and I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor, and I work on the clinical operations team here at BetterHelp. Through the years, there's been a bunch of different definitions for what the ego means. Essentially, what we're talking about today is how we view ourselves and our relationships to others. So, why does the ego matter? Well, with the ego, it's developing your sense of self-identity, exploring self-actualization. It works on your motivations, your behaviors, and your desires. And when we talk about the ego, we're trying to boost communication and interpersonal resolution skills. So understanding your ego can help you strengthen your relationship to others and understanding the egos of others around you. So we'll start with a little bit of a history of where the ego comes from. The first individual we're going to talk about is a name you've probably heard before, Sigmund Freud. Sometimes he's considered the father of modern psychiatry. When he developed his aspects of the ego, he talks about the id, the ego, and the superego. Without going into too much information about those, the idea is that the id is your carnal desires, your instincts, and the superego is kind of your conscience. So the ego lives and exists in between those two to help mediate your carnal desires and your value system, your morals, and your conscience. Not long after Sigmund Freud, we have a gentleman come along, Carl Jung. And he was a contemporary of Freud, learned from him, but he changed his idea of the ego a little bit. His focus is a lot on archetypes, these aspects of ourselves that are cross-cultural. Sometimes we've heard of them as like the hero or the villain. And with Carl Jung, the idea of the ego comes from this idea of the collective unconscious, that we all share these archetypes, these experiences, and that as we develop through life, it helps to figure out who we are. And understanding the ego is important because it helps our self-identification and self-esteem. So about 30 years after Carl Jung, we have an individual come along, Erikson, and his approach really focused on childhood development and our development pretty much throughout our whole life. He has these 8 stages that talk about things like industry and trust and guilt. The development of the ego is based on these conflicts that we have to resolve throughout our life. And this starts at a very young age as we're learning and discovering the world around us, and goes all the way through late adulthood, even till the point we die. And part of that is developing who we are, and that leads to self-actualization. So after Erikson comes along this whole different approach called the humanistic approach. The idea of the humanistic approach is that people have free will, so we can develop who we are on and of our own accord. You might have heard some names like Carl Rogers or Abraham Maslow, where they talk about things like our hierarchy of needs. So needing food, shelter, love, and ultimately, again, self-actualization. So the humanistic approach talks of the ego as a core part, an essential piece of our being, and how we relate to others, and how we exist in the world. And when we talk about self-actualization, what we mean is becoming your most authentic self, living up to the goals and ideals that you want for your life. After the humanistic approach, which kind of took over modern psychology, many years in the future, in the 90s, was the development of positive psychology. And the approach to positive psychology is that individuals are inherently good, and that even when bad things happen or there's trauma, we can learn and grow from those pieces. So from positive psychology, the idea of the ego is we're developing who we are and who we want to be based on these challenges we've lived in our life. And when we have resilience and we have these protective factors like friends, community, even employment, we can strengthen and develop our sense of self. When challenges arise that impact how our ego develops and our sense of self, some individuals might develop personality disorders. And when we're talking about the ego specifically, we might think of things like borderline personality disorder, where an individual's sense of self is really challenged. And what happens there is they'll seek the gratification and connection of others, and their entire sense of self hinges on what others feel about them. So another personality disorder that might develop is narcissistic personality disorder. And this one has gained a lot of traction recently in psychological study and in therapy. For someone who's struggling with narcissistic personality disorder, the ego is overinflated. So their sense of self and their sense of self within the world around them is inflated, and everything that happens, they kind of interpret as being against or for them personally. We also have obsessive compulsive personality disorder. In that case, the ego is feeling challenged and under threat. So compulsions, or things that are hard to control for an individual, kind of emerge from that lack of sense of self. And finally, and related to the ego, We can talk about paranoid personality disorder. And what the belief is that fear of the things that affect our sense of self, affect us as a person, can kind of make the world around us feel unreal or more surreal. And it can make it hard to connect with the world we live in. So now that we've talked about some challenges with the ego and how it's developed, it's really important to also focus on how to develop a healthy ego. To develop a healthy ego, we need to talk about self-awareness, we need to talk about self-compassion, and we need to talk about maintaining and developing healthy relationships. So things like mindfulness practice can help us center ourselves and really think about and explore who we are, who we want to be, and how we are in relationship to others. If you're struggling with the ego, if you're struggling with your sense of self or self-actualization, which we talked about a little bit ago, it can be really helpful to talk to a trusted friend, a partner, or in some cases, a therapist. Well, thank you all for listening and chiming in to hear all about the ego. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe, and I look forward to talking to you next time. And check out the link below. You can also go to BetterHelp.com and look for a therapist to support you in your journey or to gain additional information. Remember, stay safe and stay well.